Chicken tacos should only be trusted to chicken professionals.
That's where we come in. Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One comes with pico de gallo and creamy chipotle ranch. And the other comes with bacon, lettuce, tomato, and avocado ranch. Chicken experts since 1990. Chicken taco experts since now. Order yours today in the Zax Rewards app. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Archaeology Show. TAS goes behind the headlines to bring you the real stories about archaeology and the history around us. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeology Show, episode 128.
On today's show, we talk about ancient chicken eggs, a unique child burial, and Viking textiles.
Let's dig a little deeper. All right, welcome to the show, everyone. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Sitting in my solar-cooled RV.
It is pretty awesome how it's working.
Yeah, so we missed an episode because we were just slammed with getting stuff done in Reno, Nevada, and part of that was our solar installation on our RV and new lithium batteries. But if you want to hear more about that, I'm sure I will be talking about it with Paul over at the Archaeotech podcast, ArchPodNet.com/Archaeotech.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely related to archaeology for people who might be tired of hearing about our RV life. But it's really cool because we can take this thing out into the middle of nowhere. And I like to do that because I'm an introvert and I don't want to see people ever. But it's also great when you have a really remote archaeological project you need to work on.
Yeah, and if the IRS is listening, that's why this is a business expense. So
it totally is.
It really is, though. I mean, there's lots of stuff we do with our business that requires us to be in remote areas for a long time. And this archaeology project, for example, if this park that happens to be close by to the site that we're on right now, I don't know, something happened to it, and actually there might be a time when we don't want to be here. We could actually stay closer to the mine, but still have all our power requirements met because we have 3 solar panels on the roof and lithium batteries.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
it's
all right.
exciting.
Like I said, I think we'll probably geek out a little more on the Archaeotech podcast, but I just had to mention it because it's super cool. So, all right. Well, we got 3 interesting news articles for you from wildly different walks of life and places and time periods, whatever.
Yeah.
They literally have nothing to do with each other aside from the fact that they're archaeology. But this first one really caught my eye and it kind of made the rounds here. And I don't know, we got this from a couple different places. Smithsonian Magazine is where we're linking it from right now. But archaeologists discover and crack an intact 1,000-year-old chicken egg. Now, there's some terms here in this article that they use that we don't necessarily use over here in the Western part of the world. For example, they said they found it in human waste in a cesspit, which that might be something you call your little brother or sister, but here we call it a privy. Right. Yeah.
Or even like a trash dump, I guess.
Yeah,
sometimes it gets mixed in together. But
yeah, I guess, but they said human waste.
So it's like specifically like toilet waste.
Yeah, toilet waste. Yeah. So, I mean, people do poop in the garbage, but I'm just saying. But,
okay, so here's the thing for me and trash dumps and privies and things. Mostly privies. How does this stuff get in there? Like, this is a whole chicken egg. And I guess from point A to point D, which results in chicken egg in the bottom of the privy, is not too crazy. But like, you hear about some crazy things that are found in privies. Yeah. How is this happening?
Well, I think it was with lack of proper sanitation. You don't put your trash out at the curbside in the morning. You put your trash where the hell you put your trash, right? So sometimes that's just down in the hole with all the other garbage that came out of your body.
So you're like, oh man, broke this spoon. Well, I gotta go poop, so I guess I'll drop it down the hole.
I mean, like all times in human life, if you think about it, anything you can just kind of put somewhere and ignore just like doesn't
Just
exist
like
anymore.
get rid of it.
Yeah. So if you can flush it down the toilet, I mean, we flush lots of weird things down the toilet these days.
That's true.
You know,
Yeah.
because it just goes to this magical place that nobody knows about and doesn't
Yeah.
exist, and only archaeologists get to have fun with it.
Yeah, just like wipe
So-
it away from your view, therefore it's gone.
Literally wipe it away. So
Oh no.
Anyway.
No more toilet jokes. That was your one gimme.
okay. So anyway, so they
Yes.
found this egg, and it was. I wrote down, what were the exact notes that I had here? First off, archaeologists were astonished. I wrote that down.
They're always astonished.
I know. So anyway, it's a chicken egg.
Yes.
So I think we mentioned that. We'll talk about chickens in a little bit here. They often find egg shells and egg
Right.
fragments. I wouldn't say often, but a lot of times they do, because they're made out of very, not porous isn't the right word, but dissolvable types of materials.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if the
They
eggshell is in
decompose.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If the eggshell's in the right environment, it could just like disappear over a few years. So
Though the privy environment tends to preserve well, which I think is why you find things in that
Right.
context often.
right. But let's talk about how they got this out first off, because they didn't break it on site, and they didn't break it on purpose either. It sounds like they broke it in a lab.
Yeah.
But let's just talk about the excavation, because a lot of times, I mean, I've been on digs and stuff where we're working in, hard packed soils, and you're using a pickaxe to do it. You have to, and there's those. I'll always remember the excavation in South Carolina that we did. Actually, it was in North Carolina and off the Cape Fear River.
Oh, yeah. By
And
Wilmington.
yeah, and we were digging in sand essentially, and you're digging these 1x1 units, and we had some relatively deep ones, deep enough that I could stand in one, and I'm digging in this corner unit, so I had basically two sides that I could bring my shovel in from. And I think I was probably using a flat shovel and just digging thin slices at a time, just making my way around this thing. And all of a sudden I hear this little ting, and that is the unmistakable ting of stone.
Yeah. And there
And
wasn't a lot of stone in
No.
this, so that was cause for stopping.
right. And
Yeah.
so I was like, oh, I don't know what that is. And you got to resist the urge to just go in there and start digging around it. I basically started kind of testing the edges with my shovel. When I realized it was a little bigger than I expected, it wasn't just like a single projectile point or something like that. I started, just focusing on other areas of the unit. And I took the whole unit down to the level it was supposed to be at. And I basically what we call pedestaled the artifacts that were there. And it turns out I ended up spending probably a couple days on it, because I had to get in there with, not very many times in my archaeological life I've had to get in with like brushes and stuff, but legit using like brushes and chopsticks, because you don't want to use metal tools on this stuff. It'll scratch it, it'll deform it. But you use like shaped chopsticks and other things. And it was a cache of projectile points. The point is, I wouldn't have found that had I just been chunking out the soil.
Right.
So
Very delicate.
it really is. And sometimes, depending on the matrix or the strata that you're in, you have to be more delicate than others. If it's super hard, well, sometimes you got to use a pickaxe. If it's not, then you can be and should be a little bit more delicate. So the fact that they pulled this out intact was pretty amazing, that they even saw it like that.
Well, I imagine that given the context of what they were digging in, it was probably pretty soft to begin with, right? Because I think I read that part of the reason why it was preserved is because it was on a cushion of human waste, basically.
Oh no, let's use the words.
Okay, let's use the words.
It was pillowed in soft human waste, which created an anaerobic, no oxygen conditions, preventing decay.
Well, I try to be
specifically
like,
wrote that down
try to be like a little sexy while talking about.
because I think that's going to be. I
Pillowing
think that's a
poop.
good band name. Pillowed in soft human waste.
Oh, anyway, well, obviously I don't know what the conditions were actually like, but that gives me the impression that they're probably working in fairly soft soils to begin with, and that they were probably taking care to not to just mow through anything.
Sounds like even calling it soils is a little bit generous.
Yeah, that might be generous. Yeah.
Because when human waste, if this thing was used for a long period of time, and it's in an environment in the Mediterranean where, they don't get super cold, they don't get crazy hot, and it's kind of like a cave, when you've got this privy environment. So it's entirely possible that this stank really bad and
Probably.
was really soft.
Yeah, the realities of excavating a privy are not as romantic as you would think.
It's not great. Yeah. Now, a lot of times when you see privies over like in this country, I mean, when you start actually digging into those soils, I mean, the smells just come out.
Yeah, they do.
But it's not like liquid or even soft anymore. I mean, usually they're filled in.
Yeah.
Which is why, it's like, oh, we moved and we're putting up another house here. We're doing something, and they just dump a bunch of dirt into it until it kind of just goes away until archaeologists come and find it. So, yeah. But this one, I don't know if it was filled in or not, but it doesn't sound like it was all the way down. Maybe it was deep enough that if they did dump soil on top of it, it just kind of protected it. So,
yep.
It seems, I wrote down in my notes here that it may have been cracked during excavation. They were a little unclear on that, but I thought for sure they said that. I thought they said that something about cracking it in the lab.
I think I read that as well. Yeah.
But either way, what's interesting to me, they just kind of glossed over this. They said they were able to repair the crack, but the yolk mostly leaked out. And I'm like, the yolk?
Yeah.
The yolk was in there?
Yeah.
That's insane.
That is crazy. It's like, what is that made of that it'll be preserved for 1,000 years? That's crazy.
That's insane. Yeah, it's totally crazy.
Yeah.
The remaining yolk was preserved for future DNA analysis, they said. I'm going to go with probably a chicken. No.
Well, they might be able to get some animal like breed or domestication or whatever. Right. I don't know what the specifics are between different chickens, but
well, I have some info on chickens here.
Do you?
Coming up.
All right.
So, first, I wanted to mention this was, as again, you got to kind of read between the lines here. This was essentially a CRM project, so that's pretty cool. The excavation is in advance of development of a new neighborhood in the city. So I'm happy of two things: one, a CRM project finds this kind of thing, and two, that they have CRM because there's a lot of countries that don't.
Yeah,
they just dig and dig and dig, and nobody cares.
Right.
So, all right. The pit also contained a bunch of other things because, again, why wouldn't you just throw your stuff in there?
You're heading out to the pooper.
I know. So
bring your trash with you.
Right. So there's one like universal here. There were 3 dolls thrown in there made out of bone. And then an oil lamp that they also found. Probably a bunch of other things, but this is just what was mentioned. And I'm like...
Dolls?
Dolls. Always dolls.
Was that like punishment? Like, you were so bad today. Throwing your doll into the toilet.
Well, I'm sure it was a brother or sister, for that matter, that threw a doll straight in.
Yeah.
But I'm like, what archaeological project has not found a doll or a doll head or something like that?
There's always dolls.
Yeah. We had a project where we were basically... going around people's backyards in a pontoon boat in Virginia. And at some point there was a pretty creepy hairless doll fastened to the front of that boat as like our ship's
like
moniker
a Barbie,
or something.
right?
Yeah. No, it wasn't. Well, was it a Barbie or was it like a bigger doll?
Oh, was it?
I can't remember.
I don't know.
It was disturbing to say the least. Anyway, they had an archaeologist in there, Lee Perry Gal. I think that's how you say it. Who's an archaeology expert on poultry in the ancient world. Talk about things to specialize on. Anyway, she says that chickens were domesticated originally in Southeast Asia around 6,000 years ago. I had no idea. Chickens are basically in every corner of the planet right now.
Yeah.
And apparently, and so they were domesticated in Southeast Asia 6,000 years ago. But I'm wondering, like, were they still kind of everywhere at that point? Are they old enough that chickens have made it to all parts of the world, or where have they been brought in? That's actually
like, did it start in one place and just spread across the world, or? Well,
I'll tell you what, on this show I've been taken to task for my chicken knowledge in the past by one of our more savvy members, and I'm sure that I will get a report on chickens and where they live and where they come from. I'm counting on you, Jill.
Man.
So anyway, I will come back with that information. I just realized I probably should have asked to begin with because, again, this is no joke. Like, we do have somebody who is kind of a chicken expert as one of our members. So anyway, she says it took some time to enter the human diet because early on when they were domesticated, they were actually used for cockfighting. They were considered beautiful and exhibited in ancient zoos and even given as presents to kings. And
wow.
Yeah.
That's not the chicken of today.
No. So Rachel's family has like a, we have like a dollar limit and we get like a Secret Santa for her family. But whoever I've got this year is getting chickens because I'm treating them like a king.
They better be laying golden eggs or something then.
Anyway, just back on chickens, one of the earliest known sites with evidence of chicken farming is in Israel, and that was 2,300 years ago after Alexander the Great conquered Jerusalem. So chicken's been around and part of the people's everyday lives for a long time.
Yeah. Although not as long as you would think.
I mean, as much chicken as we eat today.
Yeah.
And that we deal with today, it seems like it should just be around forever.
Yeah, it does seem that way.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was interesting. It's really cool finding a whole egg like that. They did, like I said, put it back together and just so they can have the whole egg. And it looks, when you see the pictures, it looks like about the size of a chicken egg. It doesn't look crazy.
Yeah. It maybe looks a little bit bigger than I expected, but but not by a lot.
Yeah, not by a lot. It's hard to tell how big this woman's hands are because there's no scale. But it's, I mean, if I'd seen it just laying there, I would be like, oh, a chicken egg. So.
Yep.
All right. Well, we're going to kind of stay in the bird theme here, and we're going to go north a little bit and talk about finches and mouths back in a minute. Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code TAS.
People are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. The hiring process can be slow and overwhelming. Simplify hiring with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. With over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. That's Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. Terms and conditions apply.
Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One with pico and creamy chipotle ranch, and the other with bacon and avocado ranch. Chicken expert since 1990. Taco expert since now. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
Welcome back to the Archaeology Show, episode 128. And we are moving to Poland and a place called Tunel Wilki Cave. I don't know how to say that. The only Polish I ever learned was something to welcome the groom's parents, who only spoke Polish, to a wedding for my best friend and her new husband, where I did the service. That's the only Polish and I forgot it. So anyway, so this article is it's called "Girl Buried with Finch in Her Mouth Puzzles Archaeologists." So we've had astonished archaeologists.
Ooh, and now we're puzzled.
And now we're puzzled.
Perfect. So
there you go. This was on Live Science, and I also found they linked to the original German journal. So I just linked to that. You check it out in the show notes.
Yeah.
It's in German. Yeah. So if you want to read it in the original German, then you can do that. But anyway, the girl was buried with, it says, the head of at least, I don't know how they don't know, like, that there's not more, but at least one finch in her mouth hundreds of years ago.
Well, it's probably because of the MNI thing, minimum number of individuals, because you're talking about skulls, right? So MNI is determined by choosing a portion of the skeleton to count up the number of individuals there. So because you don't know, because you've just got pieces. So in this case, since it was disarticulated, they probably picked a piece to be the MNI piece, and they have one or however many, and that's how they know it's at least one. Yeah.
I'd like to see the original article to see if this is just somebody, whoever wrote this article, Owen Jarvis, if they just wrote that and it was an interesting choice of words, because I would think that you'd be able to tell that there was at least more than one. Like if there's one, great, but it's only the head. Like it's not a lot to a finch head.
Yeah, I think if it's fragmented, and it just gets weird. Like you remember when we were working in Miami and we had all those just fragments of bone all mixed in together. It just got a little weird trying to figure out how many individuals you had. So you have to scientifically choose one piece, and that piece is the one that you use to count your individuals. It's really the only way to do it, and it can be wrong, but it's at least consistent,
I suppose. Well, interesting thing, and this has been a recurring theme as well throughout a lot of our articles, but this was discovered by Waldemar, I'm going to get this wrong, Chmielewski, I don't know, of southern Poland. Anyway, he discovered it during excavations in 1967 and 1968, and it was not analyzed in detail until now. And I'm like, you didn't see the finch in the skull? Like, you didn't see that? Like, back in to go, what is this? Let's take a look.
Yeah.
But anyway.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it gets really interesting, actually, because this is all not that long ago. Radiocarbon dating indicates that the girl died around 300 years ago. And according to the research here, people in Europe apparently stopped burying their dead in caves where this girl was found during the Middle Ages, making this burial highly unusual.
Oh, yeah, that is weird.
So I don't know why they stopped burying their dead in caves. It was probably some religious or superstitious thing, but
probably religious, yeah.
It just goes to show, too, that we make all these proclamations. You read these archaeology books. You might read a textbook when you're, taking a class or something like that. You can't take the definitive statements that are made in these books as actual definitive statements.
Right.
They're definitive statements for the evidence we have at hand.
Yeah.
Because this pure statement here that people stopped burying their dead in caves, people never stopped doing anything.
Yeah.
I guarantee you somebody dropped a body in the cave last week in Europe, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they were
there's
buried
always
there.
Outliers, and there's always populations that do things just a little bit differently than mainstream. So,
and there's always evidence we just haven't found yet.
Yeah.
Now that being said, we do go under the principle of if we find something, it's a common example of that thing, because finding uncommon examples of things because of their rarity would be rare. Mm-hmm. It would be nearly impossible. So we have to assume that, if we found all these cave burials during this time period, and then all of a sudden we don't have any cave burials dated to this time period, you could make the statement that they, quote, stopped burying their people in caves. But that doesn't mean everybody stopped, like you said.
Right.
So anyway, cave burials are generally absent for historical periods in Europe, the article says. The bird in the mouth is also unusual. So it's unusual on two accounts here. No other examples are known from this time in Europe, at least not that we know of, and that's my contribution to that little statement.
Right. But it's also an unusual burial for the time. So clearly we've got a whole suite of unusual factors going on here.
Right. It says the girl died between 10 and 12 years of age. Her bones showed signs of arrested growth in later years. Later is, I guess, 10 to 12. I don't know.
Yeah.
Possibly a result of metabolic disease. So she had some stuff going on. It looked like her bones had stopped growing. They can tell that because, they can tell that for a number of ways, I guess, depending on what sort of
fusions had happened or not happened and stuff like that.
And I think if your bones stop growing, then they start behaving in other ways. And then they can tell that in like a, 10 to 12-year-old girl. So there's no evidence of trauma. No evidence that she was like bludgeoned or anything like that. No clues as to how she died. And except for the bird in her mouth, there were no other grave goods. So,
and okay, just to not be devil's advocate, but just to ask, like, they're sure that the bird was placed at the time of death.
Good question. It's the head.
Yeah, which is weird. And I'm looking at this picture too. It literally looks like there's a little bird head sitting in the mouth of the skull, which all of this just seems weird to me. Yeah,
it's interesting. Like, was she placed in there and then, I don't know, another animal dragged a bird head into her mouth? I mean, any number of morbid things could have happened.
It's very possible. Yeah.
Did a bird fly in there and she had one of those post-death spasms and just like chopped its little head off and kept her? I mean, I don't really know. Oh my
God, that's gruesome.
I mean, when we're already talking about a rare circumstance of a burial, we may as well talk about the rare ways the finch could have gotten in there.
That's true. And I'm just thinking about the things that bodies do after they're dead. And one thing is that the mouth falls open, like your jaw just falls open and it's like this gaping hole. And you're right. Like there could be any number of ways that an animal, a bird or whatever got in there postmortem. Yeah. And then just being the head, like there's also any number of reasons why the body and the head could have been disconnected. Yeah. Another animal could have dragged it away or something, like you said. The bird could have gone in there and maybe even died in there, and then another animal dragged its carcass out and the head got caught on the teeth. Yeah, there's lots of... I would like to see better evidence that the bird head was placed at the time of death. That's
Right.
all I would say.
I guess the one thing that's certain is that she was buried in a cave,
She was.
and people weren't doing that very much.
And that is weird.
Yeah.
So you can't assume that there's some weird stuff going on
Right.
with
right.
this burial.
So DNA indicates that she was likely from north of Poland, possibly modern day Finland or Karelia, which is not a place I'd heard of, which is basically like, it looks like it's essentially Russia, but like not really Russia, because I think, Russia was around then, but it was more like that whole region was called Karelia. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right.
Like the north coast up there?
No, like I think like east of Finland. So Finland and east of Finland.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
it was
Like where
kind of
it's connected up there.
Right. And I don't know if
Yeah.
it's like maybe not Russia yet, or something like that. But that whole area kind of north of Poland and east of Finland was.
Well, that's pretty far away from Poland then, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, not
Potentially?
like way north, but, adjacent to Poland, I guess.
Interesting.
A little historical information that might help. From 1655 to 1657, the area was occupied by an army led by King Charles. Now, they said that King Charles, like the 10th Gustav, and I'm not sure if that was just a misprint or what, but wouldn't it be King Charles Gustav the 10th of Sweden or something? And it says King Charles X Gustav. I'm assuming means the 10th, but I don't really know.
Yeah.
Anyway, King Charles X Gustav of Sweden. The army that occupied that area included soldiers from, again, Finland and Karelia. So now we're starting to find out, okay, maybe she came there with the army.
Right.
Soldiers of that time often traveled with their families. Most low-ranked soldiers traveled with wives, mistresses, and sometimes maidservants, which tells me I'm RVing wrong. And...
Look, I don't care what happens. You're not going to bury me in a cave with a bird in my mouth, all right?
Oh, and here I even wrote a note. Karelia was a region that stretched over modern-day Russia and Finland. So, but not like all of Russia that we know today, but like that western portion of it. So, the Karelians believed that if someone died in a forest, they had to be buried in a forest rather than a cemetery. And it appears rooted, not my words, rooted, no pun intended, in cosmological conceptions of a forest being like a cemetery. I don't think a forest is like a cemetery, but
Yeah, that's
yeah.
interesting, but okay.
So, but if you die in a forest, you get buried in a forest. It seems like the girl was likely there as a result of this occupation, and then for whatever reason, probably whatever disease caused her to stop growing, she died there.
Yeah.
So
maybe this is a nod to the death ceremony, I suppose,
Yeah.
for this group of people that were displaced while they're on this army march.
Yeah, and it seems like some more information, some more, I guess, research needs to be done on those cultures, because it's
Yeah.
not the people that live there.
Right.
It's people that were visiting there through this conflict and occupation.
Yeah. Interesting.
Again, I don't know the pronunciation, but Ojkow, or OJCOW Castle, is nearby and actually housed a lot of soldiers and their families. So it was like right next to the forest there. The Finch head is special amongst some cultures, because some cultures see the souls of children as being conceived of in like the form of small birds. So if you see a small bird or something, like I did a little bit of reading on this. If you see like a small bird or something like that, like after a baby dies or something, it's like the baby's spirit in the form of a small bird.
Oh, that's so weird. I did
Yeah.
not know that at all.
Yeah. So either way, this is a unique burial, no matter how you look at it, because she's not supposed to be there. It kind of coincides with this occupation, although radiocarbon dating has a pretty big error margin bar, so it might not be.
True.
But it all the evidence all kind of points towards that. So, yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
All right. Well, I think we're done with that one. Let's head on over just a little ways and talk about some Viking textiles in yet another grave. People always get buried with the coolest things. You may have heard my pitch for membership. It's a great idea and really helps out. However, you can also support us by picking up a fun t-shirt, sticker, or something from a large selection of items from our TeePublic store. Head over to ArchPodNet.com/shop for a link. That's ArchPodNet.com/shop to pick up some fun swag and support the show.
People are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. The hiring process can be slow and overwhelming. Simplify hiring with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform With over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. That's Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. Terms and conditions apply.
Chicken tacos should only be trusted to chicken professionals.
That's where we come in. Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One comes with pico de gallo and creamy chipotle ranch. And the other comes with bacon, lettuce, tomato, and avocado ranch. Chicken experts since 1990. Chicken taco experts since now. Order yours today in the Zax Rewards app. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
All right. Welcome back to segment 3 of episode 128 of the Archaeology Show. And this is also known as the segment of historical yarns.
Why is there always one? I can't get away from yarn.
Because I have a Google alert set up for archaeology textiles, and I get amazing stories like this one whenever they come out. So,
All right, then.
Yeah. So this article is titled Unique Viking Textiles Found in Woman's Grave. So in Norway, there is an excavation in a place called Hestnes, and it's in southern Trøndelag County.
There's a lot of O's with lines through
There
them.
are. I'm so sorry, Norwegian people. Please forgive me. Anyway, so this is basically central Norway from what I can understand. And this grave dates to approximately 850 to 950 CE, and it's in the middle of the height of the Viking Age. So that's the time, and that's the place that we're talking about. Now, as for the textiles themselves and the grave goods and the things that they found there, first of all, finding Viking textiles is extremely rare. And I think that's just a preservation issue. And also, textiles and clothing were really, really valued because it's not the kind of thing where you just would throw it away and go hit up Old Navy and buy 6 new t-shirts each season.
It's old Viking.
Right? You couldn't do that. So I think it's just not super common to find discarded clothing because they would literally wear them until they wore out and there was nothing left to preserve. So in this case, it's very rare to find these kind of textiles. The other thing that's rare here is not only did they find textile, but they found a comparatively large piece. Usually they're finding a couple centimeters, maybe, but this one is really large. It's 11 centimeters. And then the final unique thing is that it is also embroidered. Usually they find plain cloth in association with Viking burials and Viking sites. However, this one is embroidered.
Does the embroidery say made in Norway?
Oh, man, that would be so nice if it did, right? No, it does not. But it does fit with the region, I guess, the embroidery does. What little of it that they can see. So
What did they say anything about the embroidery? Embroidery, for those of us that don't really totally understand what that means, it's like threads on top of other threads that make a design, right?
Right. They've used thread to create a design on the fabric itself. Mm-hmm. And I think it's only on the outer piece of her outfit. There's a cape that she's wearing, and the embroidery is on that cape. So it's some kind of decorative, outer layer, basically. Okay. Yeah. So a little more about the burial here. She was buried in a wooden burial chamber with a long mound above the grave. And this is actually super unique for this area because in central Norway, where the grave was found, they don't usually do this kind of burial. It's more common in Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and then some in southern Norway. Mm-hmm. So right off the bat, this is a pretty unique burial because of the shape and the way it was done. And then the other thing that is interesting, well, one of the many things that is interesting is this fabric itself, the embroidered fabric. It was preserved on top of a turtle brooch. That's why they think it is some kind of outer layers, because this turtle shaped brooch likely held some underlayer of clothing on,
Right.
and then the embroidered piece of fabric was on top of it, but they found them like together with the fabric on top of the turtle.
Okay.
So in addition to the fabric on top of the turtle brooch, they also found a 3-lobed brooch, which again is unusual for this area.
I saw that. What the hell? Why is it unusual? And what is 3-lobed?
I don't know.
Means?
They did not expand on why that is unusual and what exactly it looked like. It's just that particular shape is not common to this area. So that's all I can tell you. Sorry. Now, this was really interesting to me. And they also found several hundred miniature pearls. Several hundred.
Right.
I know it sounds like a lot, but it's actually not that much. Like my wedding shawl that I knit beads into, there were several thousand in that. So
Right. But you bought those at like a bead store.
Yes, but these miniature pearls are very similar in shape to the type of beads that I would have been knitting into a shawl.
But this goes along with some of the other things we're going to talk about in the rarity of what she had. Like, I mean, several hundred miniature pearls means miniature pearls were found, from where they get miniature pearls from. Miniature clams? I don't know.
I know. Anyway, no, they didn't really talk about where they came from or anything like that. Just that they were clustered on her right shoulder, and they don't know if that means it's from a necklace that kind of fell to the side and then broke apart there, or if it's because they were embroidered on the right shoulder of whatever she was wearing. Yeah. So in addition to the pearls and things that they found that they think might have been sewn into the fabric, maybe, they also found the remains of 8 different textiles, not just the embroidered one. 6 of these textiles were wool and 2 of them were linen. And what I thought was really interesting about that is that these different fabrics, the reason they have them is because they were pinned together by the various brooches and things that they found in the area of her clothing. And because they're pinned together, the layers are pinned together, and they can see like, oh, this one was underneath this one and this one was on top of this one. And they get this like layering of how the fabrics were when they were pinned together. And they can use that to kind of reconstruct the outfit that she was wearing when she was put into the grave, which I thought that was so cool, because we don't have images, we don't have photos, we don't have pictures. There might be a painting or two around, but they don't really give you a good idea of what an everyday woman's outfit was. Now, I don't think this was an everyday woman. She definitely had some money. She was important. So
Right.
but still to know like what configuration of clothing she was wearing was. And my favorite part of this article, and I'm just going to read this. This is what one of the experts that they had consulting on the textile said. She says, "We imagine that the woman was wearing a pinafore dress, which was fastened with turtle brooches. Under the dress, she probably had on a sark or shirt of linen or fine wool. Over her shoulders, she was likely wearing a cape with embroidered decorative elements." So we've got like long shirt type thing underneath, right? And then on top of that, we've got a pinafore. Do you know what a pinafore is?
No.
Think of like Dorothy, like that. The blue dress that Dorothy wears, where it comes like the straps come over the shoulder, and you've got like you can't picture Dorothy right now.
I really can't picture Dorothy right now.
Oh my God. All right. Well, listeners, ignore him. Picture Dorothy. It's a long dress. Sometimes there's sleeves on pinafore. Sometimes there's not. It's unclear here as to what it was.
I feel like if you can actually picture Dorothy right now, you don't need to explain to you what a pinafore is.
That's true.
That's probably also something you know.
That's true. Basically, it's like a layering dress, almost like a vest type of situation. And there would have been brooches attaching the straps or attaching the back. That's probably what the turtle brooches were for. And then over that, there's the cape, and that's the piece with the embroidery, and it's the high quality, like decorative thing. The cape also had like a braid along the edge of it that was both for decoration and also for a function, because what braids do is add stability to the edge of the garment. So kind of was a dual purpose sort of situation there. So yeah, I thought that was so cool to get this like really strong picture into what what a woman in this time period, a wealthy woman, would have been wearing. It's very cool.
Yeah, and one of the things I liked in the article was they talked about all these textiles and what she was wearing and how rare it was for her to have not only like that amount of fabric on her, but like the types of fabrics.
Yeah.
And one of the analogies they used was making sails in the Viking era.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they said it takes up to around 2,000 sheep. So the wool from 2,000 sheep to make a Viking age sail. And Vikings obviously sailed all over the place. They had lots of sails, right? They probably had extra sails on board if they were smart. So while that is a striking fact, they said that in today's dollars, if you were to look at, I guess, I don't know how they were calculating this, like if you were to just buy the sheep, process the wool, and make a sail, they said it would cost about between 15 and 20 million Norwegian kroner, which, I don't know, when I was in Norway a long time ago, a kroner was worth like 7 kroner to $1, I think, or something like that. I don't know what it is today, but either way, you're still talking millions of dollars more than likely.
It's a lot.
And I'm like, okay, millions of dollars. That tells me two things. One, you can't equate things like that in the past to things like that today, because things were valued in the past in a very different way, which also makes me reflect on this woman's clothing, right? Like, sure, clothing was hard to make, but that's just part of your life. You know, clothing is a hard thing to make. Great. It's hard. Move on. So, and I understand all the jewelry and all this stuff like that. And you can look at other burials and say, yes, they were not buried with these types of things. They were not buried with these types of jewelry. But we also don't have a lot of burials from this time period, right? Because they even said that. So it's interesting to me, the value, like we place this value on making a sail and how much that would be. And we equate that to how much would it cost to make all her clothes. It would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars today to make all her clothes. But would it really? Because they didn't value things that way.
Well, yeah. And also, I think the piece they're missing is that they would make the thing one time and then you would wear it for years and years and years, you know? Even
then, no one I know or ever will know can afford to pay $100,000 for a jacket, even if they wear it for the next 20 years.
Sure.
But that's the equivalency that they're making here in cost, which tells me that either we've got it wrong on what the level of effort it took to make this kind of thing, or the level of effort wasn't seen as that kind of level of effort to the people that were doing it. Like they weren't looking at this woman going, my God, she's wearing $100,000 jacket.
No, I don't think they were, because I think they had lots and lots of sheep. Like you said, they were making sails all the time. They needed tons of sails for their Viking ships they were, and
women's clothing,
and for and men's clothing too. Everybody wore wool, and so it was just, there's a much bigger industry around it. And I think that the wool from 200 sheep was just a drop in the bucket, probably, because it was part of their lifestyle. They needed wool. They made a lot of it. You
could probably walk across Denmark on the backs of sheep and never touch the ground back then.
Norway. It'd be so soft.
I know, right?
And squishy.
It's like walking on clouds.
Yeah. So the other thing that they're going to try to do in the future with these textile remnants is get an idea of color. Now, they don't know just from looking at it. It just looks kind of like a brown, muddy thing. And it probably was dyed at some point, but they don't know what color.
Well, given how fancy she seemed.
Yeah, exactly. So they're going to do some chemical analysis to try to see if there's some remnant of color in there, which would be really interesting to find out. But they're not sure that they're going to be able to, because the thing about dyeing wool and plant fibers back in the day, that, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, whatever, is that it was always plant dyes, and those dyes just like leach right out back into the ground when they're buried. So the chances of them figuring that out are pretty low, but I'm sure there's some kind of really cool chemical processes they could do to see what I mean, they know how they made the colors. They know, like indigo, they know how they got the color, the indigo plant, so hopefully they can find some remnants and figure it out.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, that's it for these news articles. I just want to wrap up with a couple more things. I've been dropping on Mondays our newsletter that has 3 news articles in it. So check that out. You can go over to ArchPodNet.com and just scroll up the page a little bit. There'll be a pop-up and it says be the first or whatever, and you can just type in your email address. Probably going to change that at some point, but that's how you get your name on the mailing list. And then You will start getting them on Mondays and Fridays. Fridays have just our list of, podcast episodes that we released. Also, just a final note on us and this podcast in general. Like, we can't do 100% of research on everything, and we can't talk about every variation of every article.
Oh, true.
Yeah. And I just wanted to make a note of that because we've had some comments, and I really do appreciate the comments because it gives us constructive feedback. But I just want to let everybody know that, our point and goal with this podcast is to two things. One, talk about archaeology in the news from the perspective of archaeologists, so we can see how somebody with, I guess, our training and background looks at these things through that lens, but also to bring these news articles to you. So, maybe you're driving or on a treadmill or something like that, or on a walk, and you don't have time to go do that. So you're going to listen to this podcast and get some enjoyment out of it and learn something about history. These aren't intended to be a deep dive. These aren't intended to be a thorough study of a single topic. And we try to do our best to just bring you the archaeology news and maybe a little bit of a dive on some other topics sometimes.
Yeah, we'll do as much research as we can, but given the amount of time that we have to talk about these things, we do our best. And just know that if we don't talk about something, then it's not that we don't know what happened or we don't know it exists. It's just that it was likely cut for time or just not part of the topic of that day because there was no time for it.
Or just, this is a podcast, not a scholarly journal. So, we're doing our best.
Yep.
So there you go. Anyway, we really appreciate all of our listeners. We've been growing in listenership, which means you guys are sharing this episodes, which is awesome. So please share it out to family and friends who might have an interest in archaeology and, learning something about the world. And then check out all the other shows we have over at ArchPodNet.com. All right. See you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to The Archaeology Show. Feel free to comment and view the show notes on the website at www.archpodnet.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at ArchPodNet. Music for this show is called I Wish You Would Look from the band Sea Hero. Again, thanks for listening and have an awesome day. This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV Traveling America, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.